Hey guys, it's Bjergsen, and I'm here to talk about how to play Ryze.
Those who seek improvement, improve.
For Ryze's main rune, I go for Unsealed Spellbook because it helps Ryze's somewhat weak early laning. It also makes him harder to gank because you can start heal and then you can swap into the TP to get more lane pressure. For the first rune in the tree, I go Magical Footwear. Sometimes it's good to get the early boots on Ryze, and you can't do that with Magical Footwear, but once you do get the Magical Footwear, the extra movement speed helps a lot for catching people and getting in range. For the second rune in the inspiration tree, I run Minion Dematerializer because it has really good synergy with Ryze's E. The way it works is you can use Minion Dematerializer, and then just as the minion is about to die, you can throw E on that minion and it'll spread automatically. So it just allows you to wave clear much easier. For the third rune, I just go Cosmic Insight for a little bit of CDR. It's not too significant, and honestly, you can go Approach Velocity or Time Warp Tonic too. I just think Cosmic Insight is a little bit better because having that little bit of extra CDR is always helpful throughout the game, and I feel like the others are pretty negligible anyway. For the secondary rune tree, I go for Sorcery, and I go Mana Flow Band because Ryze has some really high mana cost abilities, especially his E. Once you get more levels in your E, it goes up to just 100 mana, and it's like a 2-second cooldown. So even though you're building a lot of mana items, you're also spending an insane amount of mana with the spell flux. So the Mana Flow Band helps in that way, and just make sure you're always staying high on mana, especially in the early game. For my second rune, I go Celerity because Ryze is just really good with movement speed in general, and you get extra AP when you proc your passive shield that gives movement speed. Ryze isn't really the longest range mage, so having movement speed so you can get in range and start getting your combos off, that'll give you the ability to chase using your passive. For skill order, I almost always go E level 1. It's just a fairly low cooldown ability you can use to push, you can use to trade, use E auto attack level 1. In certain matchups, you can go W if it's someone that plays really aggressive. It's the highest damage ability, but it has a long cooldown. Usually you go E, Q, W for the first 3 levels, and then you want to do 4 levels in Q, up to level 7, and then you want to do full Emax and then max Q. The reason why you don't do Emax right away is because the mana cost is too high to sustain early game. So you go for some levels in Q early, which has a lot lower on mana cost, and then once you start getting tier, catalyst, blue buff, you start maxing the E because it's going to give you the highest damage output and the best wave clear. The only problem is the mana, so once you get higher levels, the mana won't be a problem. And obviously getting ult whenever possible. For items, I always start Sapphire Crystal with Refillable Potion. It's a really weak item start, but since you have Spellbook, you can always just base and TP back to lane once you have money for tier, or just staying in lane as long as you can. Playing fairly safe. You don't want to play super aggressive because if the enemy has Doran's Ring, it's generally a better buy, but you're going to get more value out of the Sapphire Crystal as soon as you get 1 base off, and it allows you to get tier as soon as possible. After the Sapphire Crystal, you obviously want to go into tier as Ryze, and then you want to go Catalyst, and then you have 2 options, either Abyssal Mask or Rod of Ages. The most commonly built is Abyssal Mask because it's just the safest, and it allows Ryze to play more aggressive in teamfights because it makes you tankier, and he's usually going to be lower range than most mages. Orianna, Syndra, Cassio, these champions have longer range than Ryze, so it helps to be a little tankier so you can get in their face. After your Catalyst upgrade, you want to upgrade your tier into Archangel as soon as possible. Pretty much after the 2 items, there's no set build on Ryze. It's really going to depend on the game, but I think the most common will most likely be either Deathcap, Void Staff, or Leandry's. And then closing out the build is pretty simple. You just want to make sure you have a Deathcap and a Void Staff in there, and then whichever items are really just going to depend on what you need. Either Banshees, Zhonya's, Leandry's, or Murillo. Any combination of those items. For Ryze early laning, obviously it's going to depend on the matchup, but most of the time you want to play fairly safe, at least not forcing trades, but you still want to take trades if they walk out and play aggressive on you. Ryze still has a lot of damage in the early game, but his spells are blockable by the minions, and you don't have that much mana to deal with in lane because you don't have the regen from the Doran's Ring, you just have the fat mana from the Sapphire Crystal. So if you're constantly trading, eventually you're going to go But really, the most important thing is that you don't die or get pushed out of lane before you get tier of the goddess, which is 400 gold. So that's really your aim in every single early game, is getting tier on your first base. In mid to late game, Ryze has a lot of options depending on your team comp, depending on the enemy team's team comp. You can keep teleport and you can play him kind of as a split pusher. Unfortunately, you can't use ulti Zhonya's to escape anymore on the side lane, but Ryze is still really strong in 1 versus 1. He can 1v1 most champions in the game after you get your Seraph's Embrace. And he can still use the ulti to escape as long as you don't get CC'd. You can also play Ryze kind of like as a flanker, using your ulti to go behind them and focusing the carries. You can build more to kill tanks with Liandry's Void Staff, and you can just play to kill the front line and use your CC to allow your teammates to do damage or allow your teammates to get their CC off. There's really no clear-cut way to play Ryze, which is why I think Ryze also has somewhat of a low win percent in solo queue, is because he has a lot of different ways you can play the game depending on the team comps, and it's really going to come down to you to judge every game how you feel is best. And if you don't know, then try split pushing, try team fighting and hitting closest target, or looking for backline access. You're going to learn every single time you play, and then next time you'll be able to judge better what playstyle is kind of best for that game. Using the ulti, I think you mostly have to be careful that when you're split pushing on the side lane, you don't overstay and they manage to catch you with a CC or anything that can cancel your ultimate. Also, don't be too tempted to ulti your teammates into the backline or into a team fight, or ulting yourself on top of the enemy team. I've done that many times and died.
What if this gives vision? Oh, it does.
In solo queue, you don't have the synergy really with your teammates where they're gonna take the ulti at the right time. Most of them, either they're gonna clump up and all die, or maybe enough people won't take it. Generally, I like to use my ulti mostly for roaming, bringing minion waves into tower, split pushing, getting away by myself. I feel like using it for coordinated team play is really difficult in solo queue because there's no way to really rally your team into what you're doing. So I suggest using it more of as a selfish ability rather than trying to set your team up to do crazy stuff. For Ryze combos, there's no certain combos that I can just tell you to use at different times. It really just comes down to understanding how the spells interact and making a different choice in each case, because every time you use a spell, you have a decision of whether you want to slow down your damage output or reduce your damage output for the speed and shield, or how long you really have to cast. Because if you want to do as much damage as possible, you can do Q first and then you can just do your spells like that. But that's, I think, 7 casts in a row, and you don't get your root off until the 4th spell. So, but oftentimes you're going to need to use your root earlier. So it just comes down to understanding that starting out with your Q is usually the best in terms of damage, because it's essentially a free spell. Once you use your W or E, it'll come back up. And then just on a case-to-case basis, whether you need the longer root duration, whether you need more damage, whether you're going to need the shield to either kite or continue the chase, or just to soak up some damage. I guess some really basic combos for farming, the most standard is just using E twice on the same minion, and using Q to spread it and wave clear. It's often used on the cannons to kill the waves. A combo that I like to use that I don't see a lot of other people using consistently is just starting with E or starting with QE and then using QW. So you get the 2-second root, but you also get the free Q in between. A lot of time people just do E, W, Q if they want the longer root. But if you cast it fast enough, you can actually do QW, and then it just gives you another free Q in your spell duration. I think a big thing about playing Ryze is really just knowing your limits and playing a lot of games on him, because some games you can go completely bananas and just run into the enemy team and be so tanky using your shield and your Seraphs and stay alive, and some games you're just barely not strong enough and you end up dying. And it's really being able to play that line as Ryze is really important, and understanding exactly when you can fight someone, when you can go crazy, when you have to play a little bit safer, when you can split push. And it just takes a lot of games, which is why I think Ryze also has a low win rate. But if you're willing to put time into him, he's a really strong champion, which shows since he's so often picked or banned in competitive play. Thank you guys for watching my guide. Make sure to subscribe to the TSM YouTube channel, and thanks to GEICO for their support in the making of this video.